Transport Committee meeting. Can we, first of all, take any apologies for absence? Visha.
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Assembly Member Badenoch and Assembly Member Bailey is substituting for her.
Welcome back, Assembly Member Bailey, to Transport Committee. Our main discussion today is going to be on bus safety, but we've got a few items of formal business to get through first. If anyone is using their mobile phones or other things for social media, please make sure they're on silent. And I'm told we use the hashtag Assembly Transport and hashtag bus safety. We have a few visitors in the gallery this morning. Welcome to them as well. Can we do declarations of interest? Has anyone got anything else to declare other than that that's listed? No? 3 of those. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of January to be signed by me as a correct record? Lovely, thank you. Summary list of actions. Can we note the completed and outstanding actions from our previous meetings? Lovely, thank you. Action taken under delegated authority. Can we note the action taken by me, then me to agree a letter to the Department for Transport about surface transport access to Heathrow Airport?
Noted.
Lovely, great. So let's move then on to our main item today, which is on bus safety. What I should just say is we've got a hearing this morning. We're then going to be following this up with a series of round tables. So we've got a round table with bus drivers and their representatives, with bus operators, and then also we've got a meeting with bus safety campaigner Tom Kearney to make sure that we really collect a lot of evidence on this to feed into our work. Before we get into our main questions, I did just ask TfL and Gareth, actually let me introduce everyone first and then I'll come to you, Gareth. I'm just very keen to get into our question there. To welcome our panel of guests before us this morning. So we've got Sarah Hope here. Welcome, Sarah. She's a victim support consultant for TfL and founder of the Sarah Hope Line and Elizabeth's Legacy of Hope. So welcome, thank you for coming along today. We've got Wayne King, who is the Regional Coordinating Officer for Unite. Thank you for coming. We've got Jane Lupson, who is the Bus Collision Reduction Programme Manager at TfL. Welcome, Jane. First time, I think, before us. Gareth Powell, who was here last month, Director of TfL Strategy and Contracted Services. Welcome. Chris Langer is here today, who is from Cirrus? Cyrus. We were discussing this earlier. They pronounce it Cyrus. We all pronounce it Cirrus, I think, which is the Confidential Incident Reporting and Analysis System, and Chris is the Scheme Intelligence Manager, so look forward to your contribution later. And then Tony Wilson, who is Managing Director for London Surrey for Abellio Bus Company. So thank you all very much indeed for coming along today. Gareth, could we just ask you to start off with, since we have this hearing today looking at bus safety, we're told that 423 of the new route masters have got a fault with their back doors. They're having to have work done to correct that fault. And I think there's a DVLA notice that's been issued. Could you update us on that safety issue and whether the buses have to be immediately taken out of service or how this safety issue can be resolved?
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning. So there was an incident in November of last year, one incident, where a driver repeatedly pressed the door close button, repeatedly, many, many times. And in that circumstance, the system attempted to open the doors briefly to recycle itself. Now, the bus was travelling at below 5 miles an hour. If the bus was travelling above 5 miles an hour, that wouldn't have been possible in any sense. When the door opened, the halt brake was applied, which is standard procedure, and the bus came to a quite sudden halt, which resulted in a minor injury to a passenger. Because of the minor injury, the bus company, the bus operator, reported that, as they do through their normal processes, through to the DVSA, and advice was issued. What actually is the underlying cause is that within the software tries to reset itself if there are these multiple door close button presses. So it's a relatively simple modification by the manufacturer to be able to update the software on the buses so that that then isn't possible. That has been done now on over half of the buses that are in service, and the programme is ongoing as we speak to update them across the entire fleet. So it isn't the situation that has happened before on the new Route Master. It isn't a very likely situation either, because it is just a repeated press, and of course all drivers have been reminded not to do that, and we don't really know the circumstances as to why that was felt necessary at the time. But as I say, the modifications are in train and will be completed in a matter of weeks.
So could you just say, so a driver whilst driving was non-stop pressing door close button?
So we understand. That was in the incident reported to the DVSA.
Right, so that was slightly unusual.
Very unusual.
And it's because of that the doors tried to reset themselves and therefore they opened
slightly, which then applied the whole brake, which could only happen anyway below 5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So it's an unusual set of circumstances. It's reported as a recall. In actually what it is it's a standard notice process to the manufacturer. Manufacturer has produced a fix to this isolated incident, and that fix is being rolled out as we speak, and over half the buses are now updated.
So we had 423, so you're saying over 212 have been fixed?
Yeah.
And are they don't have to go back to Northern Ireland, I presume they can fix
No,
them?
yeah, it's an update of the software.
Garages
So,
here,
yes,
so it's an update to the software.
It is,
So
yes.
when do you anticipate the other 200 being fixed?
Well, it's an ongoing process at the moment, and we anticipate, we're just talking to the manufacturer about exactly when they can complete the last few, but we think it'll be over the next few weeks, so it's a rapid process.
But they don't have to come out of service in the meantime? Okay. Florence, did you want to pick up anything on this?
I don't know if you asked about the cost associated to that. So what will that cost be to TfL? Because my understanding was that these buses were actually purchased by TfL instead of the operators. So again, highlighting quite how expensive these buses are. So what cost will that be to TfL?
There's no cost to TfL. This has all been done by the manufacturer as part of their processes.
Okay.
Anything else you want to ask, Florence?
No, those are all.
Lovely. Okay, thank you for that. We just wanted to make sure that was on record. I want to pick up then the first area of questions, which is looking at the bus safety programme. So maybe we can direct this to TfL to start off with. We know that there were 4,297 injuries, quarter 1 to quarter 3 in 2015-16, compared to 4,196 over the same period the year before. So we've seen 2.5% increase. You launched in February 2016 your bus safety programme. What has that programme achieved since it launched a year ago? So is that Jane?
If I may just start, Chair, and then Jane will pick up. Before we start, can I just say that safety is our top priority. We've said that many times in different hearings and publicly. And of course, any injury on the bus network is one injury too many. And we take that very seriously. It is a responsibility of TfL, it's a responsibility of the operators, the drivers, all that work in the bus industry in London to address this issue. And it is the subject of a very considerable amount of focus. The bus safety initiative that you refer to is part of that overall process. It's by no means everything that's happening. And I hope today we'll be able to have a full discussion of all of the initiatives that we're doing. We very much welcome this discussion and the round tables that the committee is going to have, because actually in this area, as in many areas, the more information, the more suggestions, the more discussion that's had of these issues, the better we're all able to address and move forward and make modifications and changes to things that we do and to make the overall system safer. So we very much welcome this, and we welcome the opportunity to talk to you about what we're doing and to receive feedback and to get suggestions from committee members and others to be able to do so. The bus safety programme itself, which as you say was launched last February, specifically aims to continue to drive down the number of people killed and seriously injured on the bus network and reduce the number of injuries on the bus itself. And of course we must consider both aspects of bus safety, the injuries that are caused when there's a collision with a bus and the injuries that occur to passengers on the bus as they're travelling. And of course in many cases the two relate to one another, because evasive action taken by a driver may result in something like sharp braking, which may indeed result in some form of injury to a bus passenger. So the whole subject, in our view, needs to be taken in the round, and we very much welcome this discussion that we're able to have today and the subsequent roundtables and your report that we come to. Shane, did you want to?
So what has the programme achieved since it launched?
Okay, so in February we made a public statement about a number of different things we were hoping to deliver both in the past year and going forward. Some of the highlights, I think, have been Cyrus, which I think we'll probably talk about in more detail later. That was launched in January, just before the programme itself, so that all bus operators are now signed up to that. In March, we launched the Incident Support Service, the Sarah Hope line. Again, I think we'll probably talk about that in more detail a bit later on. In July, we had our London Bus Awards, and for the first time, there was a Safety Champion category, which was very well received. We had a lot of applications for that. We focused very much over the summer on our data. We're very, very keen that the start of this process really needed to be about making more data publicly available and ensuring that there's transparency across everything we do. This included both the Stats 19 10-year trend paper and also making the IRIS data, which we publish every quarter, more accessible to the general public. And we also produced some dashboards to reflect that. Also on the transparency, we have now published the summary findings of our collision investigations online. Obviously, once the police investigations and coroner reports have been completed, there's only certain amounts of information we can share at certain points. We kicked off a big piece of work looking at the police collision investigation files to really do a sort of deep dive into actually what the causes of fatalities have been and what the countermeasures would be to actually prevent those kinds of collisions happening in the future. And that's been a key part of starting the work towards the development of the bus safety standard, which is around making changes to the vehicle in terms of technology and also in terms of its physical design. But through that process, we've not only had suggestions on what we could fit to the bus that would improve safety, but also around the human factors, what can we do with drivers, what can we do with other road users, and also what we can do with the road environment, because it's important that we cover all of those in the round. And finally, on the bus safety standard, once that countermeasures list had been brought together in the research, we had a workshop with manufacturers and bus operators to discuss the feasibility of those countermeasures, because of course we've got to primarily consider their effectiveness for safety, but also their cost, how they might interact or maybe have an adverse effect on each other if we start fitting lots of things to the bus. So that's kind of the start of that process. It's really important that we kind of take the bus operators and the manufacturers with us on that journey.
We'll get into the detail of some of these things as we go through it, but what plans do you have on how you report, how you're delivering against some of the sort of objectives, some of this targets maybe you're setting in this area?
So, as you know, TfL produce an annual road safety report, and the bus safety programme will very much be part of that. We also report to the Safety and Sustainability and Human Resource Panel, which is a subset of TfL board, and I produce a paper for that every session.
So that's publicly available, isn't it? So
it is, yes.
That. And what's about funding for the programme? Is that secured in the business plan?
It is, yes. We've got £33.5 million secured in the business plan. So that's over the next 5 years, and that includes, the majority of that is the development of the bus safety standard, and then the first sort of 3.5, 4 years of the rollout onto the new bus fleet. But it's probably worth also highlighting the fact that in the business plan we have £2.1 billion for the Healthy Streets initiative, and that's obviously road safety is rolled up into that as well.
Yeah, lovely. And who at TfL has overall responsibility for bus safety?
I do.
Gareth does. Okay, lovely. That's great. Thank you very much. Let's move on to monitoring bus safety. Keith.
Thank you. I suppose to start with Gareth. The chairman touched on targets. Do you have targets to reduce?
So, it's a very difficult area, I think. I start by reiterating that every injury, every casualty, every accident is one too many. And the Mayor has set out his Vision Zero, which is actually to have a long-term aspiration and long-term target to have zero collisions and accidents on the road network. So we work very much with that in mind. Targets are not currently set by the TfL board specifically for bus or indeed for road safety, but they are being developed now, and we are having discussions with the panel of the TfL board, as Jane outlined. And the bus safety targets will be developed in the same way and be part of the overall road safety targets that will be published in due course.
So when can we expect to see some targets then?
This year.
This year? Mid, late?
Well, that will depend on the process with the TfL board, but it's being developed now, so I would anticipate progress over the next few months.
Few months, okay, thank you. There's some trend analysis of Stats 19, and that is showing that over a 10-year period there's a fall in trend, but do we think that's reliable?
So that is the national database used by the police for all of these sorts of incidents, and clearly it is a primary source of data for us. As to its reliability or integrity, that's really a matter for the police who collect and maintain that data. We use it very actively. We've been working with the police in London to improve its timeliness, and indeed they are moving towards a system where police officers are able to record in real time through handheld devices the nature of incidents, which will improve the speed and we believe also support the quality of what's recorded. One of the frustrations I think in the past has been the time lag between the data, the incident occurring and then the data being available. And this process that the police are doing, that we're working very closely with them, will speed that up. And what we want to be able to do is to bring together and to be able to publish data from our own sources, from the IRIS database that we have that the operators complete for us on all incidents, and the data that is coming from the Stats 19 process that the police collect on the incidents that they're involved in. We want to be able to publish that within a month, ideally. We'd like to do it real time, actually, but the aspiration here is to get it within a month, and we think we should be able to do that by about May of this year. So it's really important for us to get these data sources together, to make sure that we can interrogate them properly and that they can be available in a timely fashion and made public, because we believe that the more information on this subject that's available to everybody, the faster progress can be made by all concerned.
So you think there's going to be sort of April time then?
I think we're targeting May of this year.
Yeah, I was saying the target's May. If you deliver in April, that's...
We'll do it as soon as we can, as soon as it's available, as soon as we can put these things together. And as I say, if we could do it in real time, if we could do it the next day, we certainly would. It would be great.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you.
Okay, let's get into some of the other areas now, and we'll be bringing in some of the other guests. Navin, you're going to look at incident investigations.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a few questions for TfL colleagues, and then for the panel members would like to come in and respond. The opening question is, how is TfL making incident investigations more rigorous and transparent? Jane.
Just so that everyone is aware of how the incident investigation
Sure.
process works. So all incidents are reported to TfL by the operators via the IRIS system. And that's regardless of whether an injury has taken place. That also includes damage only. And for those incidents that have been most serious, so whether someone has been killed or seriously injured, the operators also have to provide us with a full collision investigation report known as the NIMI process. And that is a TfL mandated process whereby we specify what the information is that we need to know from the operator. That process is currently under review because at the moment we sometimes have a bit of difference in the amount of information that's provided to us. It varies from operator to operator, and we want to ensure that we're getting the full amount of data from all the operators across the piece.
And there's consistency about it.
Yes.
Can you let us know whatever tweaking or taking place as to how you're improving this process?
So can you repeat the question?
No, can you let us know when you have, the process is refined and reviewed?
When we plan to finish it,
Yeah. Okay. Any comments from any other members?
Well, I guess it's really the operators who provide the source data.
Yeah.
So TfL can police the system, if you like, and try to improve consistency across the network.
Yeah.
But each of the individual operators, we are the source of the incident. So our investigations will include depending on severity, everything from the driver's statement to witness statement, CCTV evidence, which we use comprehensively now. I think, you know, as a single source of data, that's probably the best thing we've got. Again, depending on the severity, we go out and visit location. We're looking at road layouts. We're looking at lines of sight. So either, you know, we're getting far more in depth now. We're looking at whether the hedges are obscuring the lines of sight for the drivers. Positioning of bus stops. We were talking the other day with Jane about, you know, perhaps we need to get a bit more critical about where we position the bus stop and where the bus has to go next. So there are many occasions where the bus has to go from, you know, the inside lane of a 3-carriageway or 2-carriageway junction to get right over on the other side when all the traffic's trying to go past it. So we're starting to get far more in depth about root causes. So that's the vehicle base, the road layouts, but then of course we're also looking at behaviour of drivers. We've as the same as just about every other operator I've ever come across, we're looking at driver behaviour in terms of incident prevention. So what are the simple things that a driver can do to reduce the chance either of having an incident in the first place or the severity of that incident? So, you know, there's a whole host of different things. We use independent assessors to go out and look at them in far more detail if there's a major incident in particular. But I think as an operating fraternity, and I can't speak for other people, but I do get to talk to them, I think the whole fraternity is now far more geared up to and far more focused on road traffic incidents. I've been in the business for 40 years this year, and in the past, health and safety was all about what was done in depots. And that, whilst important, ignored the fact that actually we hurt, injure and potentially kill far more people out on the road than we ever did in depots. So our depots are now safe, but we have to look outside to where the real damage is being done and where the cost comes as well. I mean, it's a very real business impact as well as the moral issues about not wanting to hurt, injure or kill people.
Serious incidents go on to TfL for their investigations, etc. My question was that how does TfL ensure that all those incidents are properly managed, reported and investigated?
So every serious incident I personally review. We have a review process with an internal group that goes through all of those each period when we can. What we do with those is we check that the investigation has been done as thoroughly as we think. We look to the things that TfL can do to assist. So if it's possible to review the highway or so on, if it's a bus stop that's a contributory factor, if there's an engineering issue across different types of bus fleets. So we bring our people that we can to look at the particular incident. We take the operator's report and we have a dialogue with the operator. And then if there are any lessons to be learned from that incident that we think can be applied more widely, they are shared across all of the operators, and we have regular meetings specifically focusing on safety and safety incidents between TfL and the operators.
I mean, I will bring in a minute. I have a couple of questions following to that as well. But whilst we are on TfL response, obviously currently you investigate and take on board serious incidents, but do you think there's benefit also in TfL taking responsibility for the sort of more kind of minor and other regular incidents, because those are also, any incident is obviously something that can be avoided or has implications. Do you think there's mileage in you taking on board the minor incidents as well for investigations?
Yes, absolutely. So every incident, minor, major, or indeed near misses, in many cases, are reported through the systems by the operators to ourselves. We looked for trend analysis on all of those. It's really important that we look for precursors as well as actually the incidents themselves. So we have an independent driver quality monitoring process, for example, that's run for us by an independent company that we use. We do annual safety audits with the operators to look at the safety processes in any individual operator and whether there are things that can be shared across the operator. So absolutely right. It's not just about serious instances. It's about the whole system of safety and the whole culture across our industry being able to focus on reducing the likelihood of these situations occurring.
Wayne, whilst sure you'd probably want to respond to what's been said, but may I also ask you if you'd like to comment whether bus drivers generally are comfortable with the process of incident reporting?
There is a limited involvement of members and trade union representatives after an accident or an incident. I'm not aware of any of our elected representatives being given reports of the final reports after the final incident or the final report past the TfL. It seems to go to a certain level and then stop. Our members are the ones that are obviously going to be intrinsically involved in this, but I'm not aware that we're informed of what it is. Our local representatives aren't informed of what the outcomes are. There is a general perception, whether it's true or not, that there is a blame culture that exists when investigations are carried out, and as soon as there's a likelihood that a driver can be blamed, the investigation will cease. And that then makes the end of it. Everything was fine. There doesn't seem to be any discussions around fatigue, stress, welfare for the driver. It's this is what happened, this is what it is, and then that is the end of it. And whether it's true or not, that is the general perception. And I think if we're talking about changing cultures, I think one of the cultures we have to change is the perception of drivers, that not everything is really always going to be the driver's fault. And that as a trade union that has the vast majority of membership across London buses at all levels, we think there'll be much better relationships can be built around involving us more in safety investigations and accident investigations.
Just before you come back, Navin, there's a constant pinging noise which seems to be coming from somebody's mobile phone in the audience. Could you please turn your phone off or have it on silent, please, or please leave the gallery if you need to be making a call. Sorry, back to you, Navin.
No problem. Can I have a response from TfL colleagues, having heard about real or perceived blame culture that Wayne has suggested? I mean, are you doing anything about this, or how we can overcome this? Because it is a serious concern, and we really do need to sort of come to the grips with this.
So maybe I'll just say about, there is no intention to have a blame culture, because a blame culture, in my view, doesn't move us all forward as quickly as we can. It's also the case that every incident we see is not the fault of the driver. In fact, in many cases, incidents and reports that I review, it isn't the fault of the driver. The driver's taken some very good and indeed in some cases very courageous avoidance actions themselves. So in general, from a TfL perspective, we don't encourage that. Actually, what we want is a collaborative culture that's able to look at the round about how we can improve the situation. But Tony, I don't know if you
I think from, again, speaking for the operating fraternity as a whole, but from experience in my company, I think I hear what Wayne says, and there may be a perception of blaming drivers. I mean, what we seek to try and establish is whether the incident was avoidable or unavoidable. And we're not, in that context, we're looking at bus drivers as professional drivers, so we give a higher standard. We expect them to drive in a more defensive manner, in a more predictive manner. But within that process, we clearly are seeking to be fair, and the ultimate arbiter will be any disciplinary process that eventually happens. Unite will represent that person, they will have all the reports. But I do take on board the feedback scenario. I mean, one of the principles of health and safety management is that representatives of the workforce are in the mix, if you like. So I think quite right, we should be giving our health and safety representatives and our union colleagues access to those NIMI reports. I've written down, that's easily done. And equally, I'm quite happy to share all the incident investigation data with them. I mean, there's nothing secret about it. It does establish or seek to establish its avoidability, unavoidability, root causes, and what can be done to improve the scenario for all of us. So I'm quite happy to share it in my company, and I can't imagine for 1 minute that my colleagues in other companies will do anything different. Picking up actually on what we were talking about and how the mechanism works, we also have a safety forum with TfL where all the operators sit with TfL to actually discuss these common issues and what we can take forward in terms of either best practice or accident reduction, incident reduction, preventative measures. So it is a closed loop in that respect, and I think, as I said earlier, the impetus from the whole organisation is to reduce the damage we do.
Do you have any trade union representation on your safety?
Yes, that's a fundamental part of the safety culture. In each depot there is a safety committee that very much includes the union representatives.
Thank you. Chair, one last question. I believe that TfL has given commitment to publish outcomes of all fatal collision investigations annually as of this year. When is that going to happen, and in what form?
That's already happened back in November, yes, and it's on our website.
Okay, and that is annual process?
Yes.
Thank you.
I didn't know if Chris wanted to come in about drivers from Cyrus's point of view, whether you picked up anything about incident reporting, and then Sarah had wanted to come in.
I think one of the main things to point out is that we're not actually about incident reporting as such. What we tend to have coming through the system are reports where long-standing safety issues, there's a perception that those issues have not been addressed on the ground, and that's why people are approaching a confidential reporting system to see if we can facilitate the resolution of what is in fact a long-standing unaddressed safety issue. So there's a perception there that people are unhappy with the internal response they've received from their operator, and they're coming to us to try and see if we can facilitate some sort of further resolution.
Okay, lovely. Sarah, you'd indicated to come in.
Yeah, my incident happened in 2007, but it wasn't, and I'll tell you more about it later, but I started talking to senior people at Transport for London in February 2014. And I think it's very interesting. We're talking about driver behaviour here, and the perception of blame that you've been talking about, that maybe bus drivers seem to think that they might automatically be blamed for something, even though maybe it wasn't their fault. I'm afraid I do need to believe, I believe that TfL staff need to respect bus drivers more. I think they need to listen to them. I think, you know, you talked about the bus driver who continually pressed the button to open the doors. What was he doing? It's really important you find out why was he doing it. Because the bus driver that damaged my family and changed our lives forever, he did that in a fit of road rage. Was that bus driver having a fit of road rage? You know, I really think it's important to find out. It's very important to find out why, because you don't want that happening again.
Absolutely.
And thank goodness that person only had a minor injury. It could have been much, much worse. And now what I'm going to say to you might sound like small fry to you, but it's something I remember from one of my first meetings with a Transport for London service manager, and he was discussing about how the bus driver's life, I mean, let's face it, it's a very sedentary life. They are sitting down all day. They're not getting any exercise. I was told that a lot of them are very overweight. And I remember saying, well, why don't, when they're having their, I don't know how long are their breaks? What are they?
Minimum of 40 minutes.
40 minutes?
That would be pretty typical across the companies. I mean, the legal minimum is 30 minutes.
Right, but the bus drivers have 40 minutes between shifts.
In most companies in London, certainly in ours.
So I just need to know, so they go back to their depots?
No, they don't.
What do they do in those?
They have mere release at various different places around the network.
So they can just go off and do what they like?
The time's theirs, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the principle of it.
How about Transport for London really look after those bus drivers when they're having their 40 minutes break? They eat really healthily, food that helps them, that makes them feel good. And I did suggest this a while ago and I never heard anything back. How about there's a gym or somewhere they can get some exercise, because it's been proved that, you know, if they increase their serotonin levels, they may be calmer in their mind. You don't want drivers driving feeling they haven't eaten properly, they're not being looked after. It's very, very important. I really believe it's very important. Exercise is vital for serotonin levels. And, you know, it was a bus driver having road rage that killed our family, that killed my mother. So I hope that Transport for London might really think about what those bus drivers do in their 40 minutes break. So they get behind the wheel of a bus feeling calm.
Package of care around bus drivers.
A package of care around bus drivers, because I do not sense from all my talks with Transport for London that there is a great deal of respect for the bus drivers. And I think maybe you need to build up that respect.
It's a really, really helpful point,
Because
Sarah.
bus drivers need to be calm behind the wheel of a bus. How many times have we gone out onto the roads and somebody's honking at you angrily? But do that behind the wheel of a bus. It's really dangerous.
Absolutely, and it is a tough job being a driver.
It is a very tough
on
job.
The streets in the moment.
The
Thanks for that.
stress is phenomenal.
So Wayne and Chris wanted to respond to that, and then we'll move on to our next area. Wayne, do you want to?
Yeah, I agree with the vast majority of what's been said. I don't think there is a great deal of compassion and respect towards London bus drivers from, to be completely honest, TfL, the operators and the general public. It is an unbelievably stressful and demanding job. The hours are relentless, early starts, late finishes. Scheduling is a continual problem across all of London. Although the ideal is that there are 40 minutes breaks, that's not always possible with traffic delays and the pressures placed on operators to run the service. Otherwise they get fined if they don't run the service properly. They get penalties for lost mileage. You end up in a continual cycle of pressure and it all ends up in one place, which is the driver. And it is stressful, and yes, there should be more care. We've just been discussing with TfL and the operators about getting a men's health bus that will travel around all the garages and help them with, you know, healthy lifestyles, work-life balance, dietary stuff and things like that. But something, again, it's a culture change. There is a problem around scheduling and breaks and rest, and I can't see it changing too soon, to be honest.
No, that's helpful though, and it sounds like something's in progress, but that's something we'll pick up.
Let's ask how many breaks per shift?
Yes,
A 40-minute.
Tony, just explain how a driver's shift.
And how long will the shift be?
Well, legally it can be up to 16 hours, but I don't think there's many people in
normal
London
driver on an Abellio route, what would they drive? And
I mean, the average week is about 42 hours plus meal release. So you're doing like a 9-hour day in general, but the longest shifts are going to be 12 hours potentially, something like that.
Potentially 12-hour shifts with just a 40-minute break during that shift?
That's a minimum. So they can very readily have more than 40 minutes. That is a minimum break.
Plus meal breaks.
Yeah.
Is it plus
That's a meal break.
Plus meal breaks. Okay.
That's not a guarantee. Again, because if you're in traffic and you get delayed, the pressure is to get the bus out again, because otherwise there's lost miles, fines and penalties, etc. So you might only get 30 minutes before you get back out on the road.
The incentives later, we'll pick that up there, but that's an important, and congestion, we have just produced a report with some bold suggestions in to try and tackle that, which would help things. Chris, you wanted to come in quickly?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of come in on that, because we recognise a lot of what you're saying there and the kinds of reports that we receive from bus drivers, and in talking to bus drivers over the phone confidentially about the concerns that we've got. Fatigue is a major source of concern, and it's the most popular alongside maintenance that comes up through confidential reports in the last year. So we have those 45 reports that we've taken, and fatigue is an issue that's flagged up. In terms of lifestyle and shift patterns and all of those things, we've actually put together a video on that, which has been shown actually at Abellio with Tony's assistance and other bus companies, to actually talk about those things, to raise awareness, diet, lifestyle, shift patterns, with an emphasis really on what the employer can do and what the employee can do, because this is a joint effort that we're talking about here, and just to bring that awareness into the culture. So there are those sorts of initiatives which we hope we can contribute to more in the future, but this is off the back of some of the things that we've heard through these confidential reports that we are receiving. So I think there's a unique opportunity there through confidential reporting, because people are free to say what they want to without fear of the repercussion from their line manager or any senior manager, because they can do that in their own time, and they trust the service. So there are those initiatives there underway, which we would like to see spread more widely.
Lovely, thank you for that. Let's move on to our next section, which is looking at driver training and monitoring. And David, you're going to...
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, some of you have mentioned things that lead into this in terms of sort of creating a culture where there's a greater emphasis on health and safety, and getting out of the depot and actually inculcating that in the fleet when people are on the road. Now, I understand that most driver training, the main part of driver training, is done by the bus companies like Abellio. So I'll start off asking you, Tony. Has driver training improved in the last year or so, and what effect have any changes or improvements had?
Certainly in our context. I mean, all the operators do it in different ways, and it does depend on, initially at least, where and how you recruit. So do you recruit staff who have got a car driving licence and then you train them up to get a bus licence, or whether they come in pre-trained? But we've certainly changed our new entrant training to now include things like the in the zone that TfL have put out there with Sarah's input, and shifted the emphasis more towards preventative measures and behaviour in terms of predicting. So we last year, up to about 18 months ago, we had a practical course that we ran as part of our CPC process. So every bus driver, every truck driver has to go through 35 hours training within a 5-year period. Generally, all of us do it as 1 day per year. In our last cycle, we introduced a very practical preventative training program. So we had drivers who went out on the road with a trainer and with some of their colleagues to refresh their knowledge in many cases, but also put them in front of their colleagues, and their colleagues then, you get a lot of interaction, and you get some very useful help from your colleagues when you do things wrong. But that proved to be very successful. So that was the practical demonstration. In this cycle, we've moved on to more the mental aspects, which sit in the zone. So it's constantly trying to refresh that process, as well as that once they're back in the organisation, bearing in mind this is only 1 day a year, that we do keep those messages very live. And we, as I know other operating companies, try and establish some very simple measures. So we have this thing called the 3 Cs, which is keeping a 3-second gap between you and the vehicle in front. See Me is all about looking for the near side, where we get a lot of incidents with cyclists and with street furniture and pedestrians, and See More, which is the global aspect. So trying to keep those mantras very much in people's minds. And if you walk into our organisation, like many others, you'll see this stuff plastered everywhere. And that's part of the battle, but actually what we've found is that people almost become blind to it. And when I ask a driver, what do you know about the 3 Cs? And they sit and look at you blankly, and then you say, but on your high visibility vest, they're on there. What are they? You know, and so it's trying to keep it alive. And I know Chris has been doing a lot of work with us and with others about it's the sort of mental aspects of safety, and how do you get these messages over in the first instance, but how do you keep them live after people have spent 1 day and seen something? Constant challenge, but we then try and relate that back to what we find in those accident investigations. So, you know, if there hasn't been this gap kept, the driver's refreshed. Now, why do you think that happened? What was the gap you kept? Why did you move off immediately? The car in front of you moved off. Those sorts of things. And just picking out actually on Wayne's incidents and this issue of blaming drivers. I know in the last week at our Battersea depot, we had around 60% of the incidents we attributed as unavoidable. So that's people hitting us or getting in our way, which is quite extraordinary. So it isn't all about blaming drivers. It's trying to find out what the root causes are and what are the real things going on behind it.
Well, I could bring in Sarah. Thanks for your answer. But you're involved in the zone programme. I wonder if you could give some thoughts on that as well. You know, has driver training improved, and what the effects are?
Yeah. Well, just in case people don't know. So on the 25th of April 2007, a bus mounted the pavement in a fit of road rage in Mortlake. My mother was killed instantly, and my daughter, who was just 2 at the time, lost her leg below the knee. I couldn't help them because I was trapped under the bus myself. I banged my head against the wall, but I sort of slipped in and out of consciousness, so I remember it well. And then about 13 months after our terrible incident, I had to go to court to give evidence. It was there I became very ill, collapsing, and I do not remember anything about that afterwards. But I would like TfL to address the need of victims having to go to court after something terrible has happened to them, regardless of liability. I think this is something, I know, sorry, not quite driver training, but I would like to just make that point. And then 7 years later, due to intervention by Boris Johnson, TfL and Metroline finally apologised, but not for 7 years. And I said at that meeting, I said, OK, well, if you're sorry, you must mean sorry must mean change. And but at that court case, I do remember listening, before I collapsed, I do remember just listening to the fact the bus driver, there was a lot of talk in the court case as to what shoes the bus driver was wearing. I have brought this up in meetings before when Isabel Dedring was at City Hall, and I don't know what's happened about that. I would like to know what sort of shoes the bus drivers wear, because there was a lot of talk about the... I can't really go into it, 'cause I can't really remember what happened, unfortunately. But footwear, surely, is vital for bus drivers. But talking of bus driver training, I made a film, I think it was in July 2014, which I think went out... Is there 24,000 bus drivers in London? And this film was picked up by a company in the north of England as well. And the surgeon who's treated both Pollyanna and myself that day, and he's looked after us for 10 years, also took part in the film, because he's a surgeon at the Chelsea and Westminster, and obviously he treats a lot of people that have been hit by buses. I have not been informed, I have not been kept, TfL haven't been informing me of what's happened with that film. I don't know about the impact of the film, I don't know whether or not it's still being shown. I don't know anything that's happened with the film, but it was a shocking film because I had to talk about what happened to me that day, and I had to try and explain the lasting damage. I need to try and get TfL to understand the impact of life-changing injuries. You know, my daughter's going to hospital next week. She couldn't walk since she couldn't walk. She's an amputee. Unfortunately, she took her leg off on the 1st of September and couldn't walk until about the 1st of January. That's what I cope with. But also, in my work, while I've been working with TfL, I've learned a lot from other people as well. And I would like to tell you about a man called George Atkinson. And I would like to tell TfL more about him. He lost his daughter about 20 years ago when she was run over by a lorry while she was standing on the pavement. He's set up something called a Learn to Live campaign, in which teenagers are told about the horrors of bad driving. And it's very, very effective, and it shows films, and it has interviews with ambulance workers who rescue teenagers who've been killed, and it shows films about the horrors of having to tell a parent their child has died. It's very, very shocking, but it's very effective, and I would like to tell TfL more about it, because I think it's now been rolled out in different counties, and it's a very effective way of teaching, this is teenagers, to drive safely, but maybe you need to refresh the shock tactics to the bus drivers, not scaring them, but just refreshing them as to how important it is to be safe at all times.
Gareth, could you just update David's question on in the zone training? Is this rolled out everywhere? Could you pick that up, please?
Yes, it is. And can I just say that all of these sorts of interventions are really important as part of the overall approach here. And, you know, we will support whatever initiatives come forward, because actually the point here is to try and develop, as Tony was saying, a constant reminder, a constant thought in drivers and other road users' heads about their own safety and about the safety of those around them. And it must be an ongoing battle that we all take on in order to keep that live. And I think you're absolutely right to highlight the causal factors, and the things what the driver's feeling and thinking, what other road users are feeling and thinking. All of these things are important, and we must all think of new creative ways to be able to keep this in the forefront of people's minds. But absolutely that in the zone training is rolled out. We're also doing other training interventions which touch on this subject and try to help as well. So we've got things that are specific, like in the zone, and CPC and other things, but there are others that are generally about the role of the driver, their attentiveness, their awareness, and how they're thinking about their customers. So the Hello London process, which all bus drivers are going through for 2 days, talks exactly about that, and actually goes very much to your point about respecting the driver. You know, the role of the driver is a very difficult one and a very complicated one, and we need that respect to come from all those associated in the bus industry and our customers, because actually that driver is doing a very difficult and very professional job. So, and Hello London is part of the process to give drivers greater customer service skills, but also to enable us more widely to have that culture developing. So I agree entirely with many of those points.
Yeah, Wayne.
In the zone training, who is it designed for? Who is it? Because Tony said about new drivers coming into the garages and stuff, but who is it designed for?
For all bus drivers. We have incorporated it into new entrant training because that's the easiest way to deliver it as we turn staff over. But it was also delivered across the whole operation to existing bus drivers as well. And we're targeting to complete that by the end of March this year. So by the fact that we get currently about 20% turnover, we've done an awful lot of new entrants at the same time as we're doing the retrospective, if you like.
Because the reason I ask is I've asked our most senior lay representatives about it, and the vast majority haven't heard of it, and the vast majority don't appear to have done it or been involved in it. I've seen a presentation that's come through that was on the TfL website, but it didn't ring or resonate with any of them when I asked them what they knew of it or knew about it. So part of my concern around this is that when these courses are designed is that the experts aren't involved, and the experts are the drivers. So people are designing a course or designing a training module for somebody for a job they probably don't do and don't understand, and they're not including the person who does the job on a day-in, day-out basis. If you want to get real training and real worth, then you probably need to involve the person who's going to be doing it. And I think we'd all agree that one day's training a year isn't going to be enough, because you'll have your training one day, 2 days later you're back doing it, or the day after you're back doing the job, and the pressures and the stresses of your job are going to push your training you just had out. Whatever training there is around safety and driving awareness and accident reduction, it needs to be a continual rolling process. It can't be a one-off every year, or it can't be any kind of singular event. It has to be continual. Then it becomes embedded in what you do and how you do it.
Well, it seems that Abellio is offering the in-the-zone training to everybody, but I wonder if I could just bring Gareth back in. Have you got any method to monitor whether, Abellio's doing it, but what about all the other bus companies? How do you monitor that they're doing it as well?
So the in-the-zone training and indeed other training courses are all rolled out with all of the operators. What we want each of the operators to do is to develop for themselves their training packages, obviously, that are specific to their circumstance. What we do in order to be able to assess the effectiveness of the operator's training is that we have this independent monitoring of driver standards, and we think that's the most effective way for us in our role to be able to provide feedback to operators to say, actually, clearly whatever you're doing, whatever tools and techniques you're using to keep this live and so on and so forth isn't working because your quality is either going up or it's going down, and we can provide that feedback. The survey process is done independently. We don't know who's going to be surveyed and where by an independent company, AA Drive Tech, and they assess exactly how the driver has performed that they experience, and that feedback goes back directly to the operator. The driver won't know they're being monitored. And it's not about individual drivers. This is about trying to provide feedback to the operators as to about how their training is working and whether we're seeing improvements in that randomised survey process. That's our primary tool. We also do that, of course, for engineering quality as well, which has a factor to play here.
It is possible that when asked the question, drivers won't recognise in the zone as the descriptor. We include it in a CPC module, which is a whole day, called Safety Matters. In the zone takes half of that day, and they do other things like first use checking and other safety related things. So it is possible that they've seen the training module, they've seen the video, and they've had the interaction, but without quite recognising it as in the zone.
Would that not suggest that that might be a fundamental flaw? Because if a driver's going to go through something that's coming from TfL, they should understand what it is, and it's coming from TfL. It shouldn't be used and then called something another name, because what you're not going to get is a consistency of understanding. Surely the best thing to do for us to do as TfL, the unions and the operators, is to come up with a consistent London-wide training programme that can be used, agreed and implemented, so that we all know what the standard is, so we all know that what our drivers are being trained is generic, is standard, and then can guarantee that there will be a consistent level of training given to them, not just about out-of-driver bus, but out-of-driver bus when you've been doing it for 2, 3, 4 and sometimes 15, 20 years. If it's not consistent, it's always likely to be flawed.
That was done for in the zone. If I remember rightly, Tangerine, who the company who were involved in producing it, came out and trained the trainers to deliver it. I'm not for 1 minute saying this is a flaw, but it was a 4-hour training module broadly, and we don't want to. I don't think any operator wants to stand drivers down for 4 hours. They want to fill a whole day, so we chose to put it into something else. But it is a very distinct piece of training that should be easily recognisable as TfL's in the zone, and it should be delivered in the same format across all of the operators.
And if I may, this is an area, I think, as many people have said, we need to keep going. We need to keep thinking of new ideas and new approaches. So one of the things that we're going to be trialling with the driver trainers is the Safe Urban Driving course, which has been rolled out for HGV drivers, particularly in urban areas, focusing on vulnerable road users. And we're trying to see how that might apply as another set of tools and techniques that can be applied. So this should be a constantly live area. This should be an area where ideas, initiatives coming from one operator, from others, are able to be synthesised, and we can keep this environment very dynamic. And I think it's a really important area that we focus together with the unions, with the operators, with the drivers themselves, with all stakeholders, because it's one that you kind of want to keep going. You always want to keep it live and fresh.
Taking up Wayne's point again from Unite and the union, I mean, how much are drivers involved in designing the courses that like the Safe Urban Driving course, the In the Zone course? There's another one called Hello London, I believe, that is being rolled out a little bit. How much are drivers involved in all of those courses?
So the courses themselves, I mean, it varies by the course to course. But if I take Hello London as an example, we ran sort of focus groups, got drivers' input, we've got operators' inputs, we had professional input too. That's a course that's focused very much on the customer. And then what we did for the first range of courses is had pilots with the drivers themselves and took the feedback that the drivers were giving us and made adjustments to the course as you go along. So there are various ways of getting input. We should always do more. We're always talking to about how we can do that and how we can get more. We need the right blend of independent professional advice, which comes from all sorts of types of expertise, with actually how is that going to be received? What are the things that drivers themselves are experiencing, and therefore how will they receive the training, and therefore how can we make it more effective? And we have to bring those two things together, and we're constantly looking about how we do that to make these courses as effective as they can be.
With the Hello London and the Safe Urban Driving training, when is the date? Have you got a date or a target for rolling them out across the whole of the bus fleet?
So Hello London is ongoing at the moment. So all the drivers today are, we have courses running 4 days a week with that. And that's a 2-year programme which will go across all drivers across London. And with specifics like the Safe Urban Driving or others and so on, as Tony said, the normal practice for operators is to have 1 day of CPC training a year for their drivers. And what we're looking to do as TfL is to continually stimulate new content for those courses and to have those then rolled out via the operators in their processes. So we're always looking for new content and new ideas there, and then it's rolled out through the CPC process typically that Tony describes.
Yeah. Now, one other thing that goes on to monitor drivers on an ongoing basis is the Mystery Traveller survey, which was last updated, I believe, in 2010. To TfL and to Abellio, do you think that is still fit for purpose? And if it is, also maybe you can answer how many times each year a driver will be subjected to a Mystery Traveller survey?
It was actually updated last year, and it's now
right.
called the Bus Customer Experience Survey. So it's more focused, it's more applicable, so that we get better data to be able to go back to individual drivers and say, you got this score and this is where you could improve. So I think that the relevance of it is now far greater, far better than it was previously. And I'm really struggling to think how many surveys are done a week or a period. I'm sure Jane...
21,000 surveys a year.
That's nearly all the bus drivers.
Yeah, so on average,
not quite all, but...
It's randomised, but there are 21,000 people at events where people are taking surveys.
But it is now much easier to go back to individuals and in terms of monitoring their performance, you've now got a useful tool. And it's far more granular, it's far easier to understand for everybody.
Does it actually have an impact in safety in terms of reducing the number of accidents and incidents that
there are,
we'll
I
see
think,
on
is it
buses?
3 questions? There are specific questions that are indicators of safety, like smooth driving and the customer's perception of smooth driving, as opposed to AA Drive Tech, who do the driver quality monitoring. They're far more sort of technically based. So it's an impression rather than some sort of objective view. But yes, it is an indicator.
Yeah. I'll just finally come back to Sarah. I mean, what do you think bus companies and TfL might do in the future? We've heard about lots of things that are ongoing, but what would you like to see happen in the future, if there's anything specific?
Regarding
bus
training.
monitoring, driver training and monitoring, and how that can impact on safety.
Well, I have to admit, I'm not such an expert on the actual safety of the buses themselves, but I do very much think about, as I've said, the mindset of the bus drivers. I think it's very important that they feel they are contributing to society. They are very important. They really are fundamental to London, bus drivers. It's very important that we have a good bus service. It's vital we get the cars off the road. We want people to feel safe. We want people to feel happy on those buses. As I've said, there's other good, people that have been involved in incidents, and so the Learn to Live campaign is a very important one. I hope that TfL might look at campaigns like that, at the work that other people are doing to make, for example, lorry drivers drive safely. The road safety charity Road Peace have a lot to offer. With, you need to look at charities like them. They are experts in what they do. And I think, as well as thinking about the actual buses themselves, we know that these incidents are not always the fault of the bus drivers. And unfortunately, we can't monitor everyone out there. But I hope very much that you'll be thinking about the mindset of the bus drivers, respecting them, understanding how important their job is, make them feel important. And just for example, do they have to pay for their lunch? Do they go out and buy their own lunch? Because if you gave them a healthy restaurant and healthy food to eat and they didn't have to pay for it, maybe they would eat healthily. Think about, I would like to think, of course, road rage is very important in my mind. And there are so many people out there with road rage. And yes, it's not really something people think about. People talk about drivers texting or drivers speeding or something, but you've got to avoid road rage and just make bus drivers feel positive about themselves. So I think that's very important to me, thinking about their well-being.
Absolutely. Just before we move on, has anyone else got any final comments about the future of bus driver training and monitoring?
It just needs to become less insular. It shouldn't be about what one operator does and then the next operator does. It should be generic, so you can guarantee when you've got a high turnover of drivers, then you've got to make sure that what you get is consistent and consistent and consistent again. That's the way you change the culture and you build a safety culture within what you do.
Can I just say, so I didn't really catch, so are people still seeing the In the Zone film that I...
And we'll continue to do so, certainly in our company, although...
Said it was rolled out across all and they weren't using it, so... Can I just pick up the issue of first aid training? Because many TfL staff and transport workers are first aid trained. It's not mandatory for bus drivers. Is this something that you consider could be rolled out across bus drivers?
I think we have a challenge in that we have two distinct things working against each other. We don't encourage drivers to get out of their cab, and in some companies, and we've also worked with this, we've told drivers not to get out of their cab to avoid conflict situations. Now, as you know, we had discussing one the other day where the driver did actually get out of the cab and helped a wheelchair passenger on board the bus and did all sorts of things. So it's a fine line. I mean, I think in a perfect world, there wouldn't be an assault screen, there wouldn't be a barrier, and there wasn't many years ago. I would love to see the bus network revert to that, because I think it's a far more customer-friendly approach.
In terms of first aid training,
I think it's a big challenge. We actually struggle to get enough people to volunteer for depot-based first aiders, let alone trying to roll it out to all the bus drivers.
Gareth Jones, is this something TfL's considered, or is it just not in your programme?
No, we've certainly considered it, and of course across all transport services we've been looking at this issue, as you know.
And as Tony says, I mean, bus drivers are human beings, and I'm sure that almost all bus drivers would want to help in the circumstances that they can. The question here is one of making sure that they're able to do their job properly, and that is something that we're talking to the operators about, because we need to take into account all the things that they need to do. In a perfect world, as Tony says, I think having a high prevalence of first aid training and the ability to go and do that in a way that is helpful and proper and makes the right decisions and so on would be fantastic. I think we have, as an industry, and indeed on some cases society, quite a long way to go to do that, because there is, going back to the original points, there is a lot of issues about fault and so on that come into this, and as I said earlier, we really ought to be moving away from that and moving towards this more progressive thing, but that is a long-term challenge for us all, I think.
I think there would be a general reticence of drivers to do it, of getting out of the cab and putting yourself, after an accident, you're then going to put yourself in the sort of like in the line of whatever's gone on, and then again a general culture, not just the drivers, about blame culture. And if the driver is concerned they might get something wrong and then be held accountable, it would be nice in an ideal world, but I don't think the reality of it would work.
Before we move on to the next session, Sean, I realise I didn't call you. You indicated earlier. Did you want to come in on your question?
I just want to ask a question about how do you relay lessons learned to the drivers. There's a lot of talk earlier on about the procedures around investigating a crash or whatever. But if you're a driver and you haven't been involved in a crash, you could still learn from an incident. Let me remove the word crash, an incident. Is there a mechanism to educate drivers across the network about things that are happening for and to other drivers?
I think it's something we could do better, and it did spark in my mind when Wayne mentioned it. What we've done is we have put out on our LCD information screens we have for all sorts of messages for drivers. We have put out images of incidents and how they could have been avoided, so that direct feedback. We also produce a route hazard booklet, which James saw the other day. So for each route, we've prepared a booklet that actually is a conglomeration of ideas and thoughts on road layouts from drivers, from the management, so as to put some of those learning experiences back into hard copy that then is distributed to all. And the key to that is not just doing it once, of course, it's refreshing it if there are incidents or if a road layout changes, that actually it's updated and it's still relevant. But I'm with you, I'm sure we could do more. It's trying to find a mechanism to do it in an effective way when drivers are not in the depot for very long is one of the big challenges we face.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to confidential health and safety reporting. Caroline Russell is going to do that.
Yes, this is about CIRAS, which is actually Confidential Incident Reporting and Analysis System. And it's great that we're looking at it now in January or February 2017, because it's about a year since it was first made available to London bus drivers. Now, I understand that last August you reported that to date 24% of all the confidential reports that, this is Chris I'm talking to, that CIRAS received this year nationwide, so that's 24% of the reports nationwide, had come from the London bus sector, despite TfL's contracted bus companies representing less than 2% of the national membership of CIRAS. And all those safety reports, except one, have come from TfL bus drivers. Now, I'm just interested in the sort of CIRAS view of this. Is this because, do you think that there are more systemic problems and issues in London with safety, and also in other groups of people who are reporting to you, so they're not TfL ones? Do you get more reports from bus drivers and managers and other people involved in the system? I.e., is it disproportionate to have so many of those reports coming from bus drivers?
I think the first thing to say is that that's not unusual.
Can I just stop you? We've got that pinging noise again. Please, the gentleman in the public gallery, will you please turn your phone off, or please leave the public gallery to use it, because it's very distracting. Chris, back to you.
So, obviously, we have introduced it to the bus community. So this is a new period in confidential reporting. Our experience from rail was that we had a large number of reports when it became a national system in 2000. We had a large number of reports, and we ran at several times the number that we do today for rail. So it wouldn't be strange for that same pattern to be replicating itself now, where we have what seems like a high proportion of reports nationally, but it is actually people getting used to CIRUS and used to what confidential reporting means, so that they then perhaps feel that they will try the system and see what difference it may make. So that's the first thing to mention, that perhaps it looks like a high proportion of the reports, but actually it's got to be sort of got to be seen in that context. It's a new system, and perhaps bus drivers feel like they would like to try that system to see how effective it is. On your second point about bus drivers reporting, yes, that's typical in that we see frontline staff reporting. It tends not to be managers. If we talk about rail, we will see signallers, drivers and track workers report. Those make up the main categories of report. And so you would expect to see the pattern that we are seeing with bus drivers reporting as part of the bus community as well. You get frontline people reporting their safety concerns because they're closest to incidents and potential incidents.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm finding it quite distracting having this other conversation going on. So yes, in July we learned that about a... Sorry, I've just lost my thread. I'm going to move on. What do you think are the most, again for Chris, what do you think are the most serious areas of concern reported by TfL bus drivers?
I think we've got two aspects there. The fact that people may want to use a confidential reporting service in the first place. To just set it in context a bit, most concerns have been reported internally. It's 91% have actually been reported internally before somebody approaches CIRUS. So they're approaching CIRUS for a particular reason, and that's because generally they feel that the safety culture where they work hasn't been able to give voice to their concern and have that addressed. So that there's a big part of this which is about the reporting culture, and we're picking up information on that these days because we can ask about how somebody's made a report internally and the kind of response that they've got. So there's a reporting culture side to it. There are also the content of those issues. So that the concern there is some of the issues that come to us, the main one being fatigue, and that is something that's being reported 24% of the time when we're talking about the issues that people are raising through ourselves. And it's the kind of thing that we see a similar pattern for in rail as well. You probably won't want to talk to your driver manager about feeling very fatigued and perhaps feeling unable to do your job very effectively, but you may well feel able to talk to a confidential reporting service about that because there are no repercussions. Drivers may well be aware of feeling fatigued, but talking to somebody about it, talking to management about it is often quite a difficult thing to do. So this is where we uniquely get that information coming in, because people can trust that there are no repercussions in saying something. I'm very, very tired, for example. They might be saying, I'm very, very tired. I'm worried that I might have an accident. It's not something that you can generally talk to your line manager about. You can say, in an ideal world, you should be able to talk to your line manager about that. It's easier sometimes to talk to a third party. So that's the voice that we're enabling to sort of come up.
And so do you think that that information is being acted on? Do you get feedback from TfL and from the bus companies? I mean, you know, having heard the testimony from Sarah Hope earlier and the importance of driver well-being, if we have 24% of those reports to CIRUS saying that people are feeling tired, and also I notice I've got a pie chart in front of me, pressurised driving, 7% of people are reporting pressurised driving, which must potentially relate to the kind of that road rage, that sort of that stress that maybe drivers come under. You know, yes, how is that acted on once that information gets to CIRUS?
I mean, I think there are two approaches there. So one is on a case-by-case basis. So we take a report, that report is processed. We are acting as an independent facilitator, and we're asking the operator concerned to have a look at that particular issue, and very often we're posing questions about how that is actually being dealt with systemically. So it's not just about this one report, but perhaps if there is a wider issue there, how is that being addressed in terms of initiatives on driver training, on talking to drivers about fatigue. So that's on a case-by-case basis. So we will take a report, that will be processed, and we're looking at the quality of response that comes back and acting as a facilitator to try and see that our original reporter is satisfied and that concern has been acted on. So that's how it works on that front. On the second front, it's about collecting those reports together, as we've done here, looking for those trends. We've identified in our small sample, we really should say that it's quite a small sample here. We're only talking about 45 reports over the year. But if we are collecting something together which seems significant to ourselves, what we want to do obviously is work with the operators to design initiatives, if that's appropriate, to talk about some of the things that come through in our report. So the obvious one is fatigue. So we've taken that particular issue and run with it and said to the operators, like in the case of Abellio, how can we actually help you facilitate some kind of discussion on that amongst managers and drivers in particular, to raise awareness about the issues that may impact on themselves, whether we're talking about shifts and breaks or whether we're talking about lifestyle factors. And so what we're trying to do is inject that into the conversation. And what we found there is that, generally people are quite unaware, perhaps in the job that they do, of the effects of driving for a long time in a small confined space. And then the aspect of it that we want to concentrate on is what you can actually do about that. And talking about these issues, highlighting exercise, dietary, and that kind of advice is one way of getting that conversation going.
Thank you. Can I perhaps bring in Tony at this point?
Yeah.
Do you find these CIRAS reports helpful to you in terms of how you manage your bus operation?
We haven't had very many. And the one, I suppose, relevant for today, probably more than others, was a very much a generic complaint or awareness raising of fatigue. But it was a generic one, and where it's really targeted as it's an issue across the whole of the network is late finishing of drivers. And it's an issue for us, it's an issue for Wayne's members, it's an issue for TfL. And because of worsening traffic congestion or sustained traffic congestion, it got worse and it's pretty much not getting any better just at the moment. Late finish of duties is one of the biggest issues we face with not only driver welfare but driver well-being in the largest sense. I mean, most of us want to come to work and have some idea of when we're going to go home. That's quite a challenge for drivers at the moment because of the very variable traffic conditions we deal with. So this generic approach to fatigue is not easy to answer in the things we do, but we have worked with CIRAS in particular, as Chris said. We've gone out and we've talked to drivers about having sufficient rest, about looking after their health, looking after their diet, and all the things we can do, while still trying to tackle with TfL and within our own environment, how do we address this late finish issue? How can we get bus schedules that are more appropriate to what are very variable traffic conditions is the worst thing. You can only schedule for a particular traffic condition, and we don't schedule for the worst, we don't schedule for the best, but it will never be right in that context, and therefore you have to make adjustments, and things don't go as planned. So it's quite a difficult challenge for all of us. We are working hard with TfL and with the union as well to do things about it, but it isn't going to be one of those that we solve overnight.
But just taking us back to CIRAS, do you find having membership of CIRAS useful? It's
another outlet, I think, which is useful. So there haven't been very many in our organisation. I think all of the other managing directors I've spoken to in the operating fraternity, we all have whistleblowing policies as well. So it's just another outlet for drivers or for any staff where they may feel more freer, if you like, to have this non-attributable reporting line. But there haven't been many of them, and I think initially there would have been a rush for reporting, but it wasn't exactly an overwhelming flood, was it, in reality? Very, very low volume. So I think it's trying to get it into context. It's another way of people expressing their concerns, but I'm trying to think how many we've had. 5, 6, I should think, in total since we
But
started.
it is useful to you to be able to hear from bus drivers
any
in
way
another
that
channel.
people can express their views, I think, is useful. And it's another one that some will feel more comfortable than others in using it.
Yes. Do you, in your bus company, what's the proportion between employee bus drivers and agency workers?
We've just at this moment we've probably got a dozen true agency workers, but we've got over 2,000 bus drivers.
Okay, so that's a very small proportion.
It's a point in time. It's because at the end of last year we had some contract changes where we were going to lose work. We didn't want to recruit a load of drivers to fill those holes, whilst we knew that in December and January we were going to lose contracts. So it was just getting over a particular problem at the time. It's not a matter of course that we would employ true agency drivers.
And do the agency workers also have access to CIRAS?
Yeah, they would do in the normal way. We treat them as any other employee. There's no reason why they couldn't report it to CIRAS. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving on to Transport for London. So Gareth, well, sort of broadly, first of all, sort of, do you think that the CIRAS reporting is helping you to make improvements in terms of reducing road danger in London attributable to buses?
Yeah, so as you know, we've been very encouraging of the CIRAS initiative. It rolled out across all of TfL services, actually, regardless of who operates it, the vast majority in any case. And our Director of Health, Safety and Environment, Jill Collis, actually sits very closely with CIRAS on the board there, and we get summary reports back which are relevant to not only to the bus operators, but also, of course, to other areas of our transport delivery. So we just like Tony said, any other outlet that exists for drivers or frontline employees or others to be able to express things that they didn't otherwise feel they wanted to express has to be really useful. And the reporting that we get back is just another mechanism, another flag, another symbol of things that we can then take action against. So it's not, in our case, it's not specific to the individual instance, of course, and so on, because that's for the bus operators. But in our case, this is about looking at whether there are trends. So, for example, the issue of fatigue and late finishes and all of those things is an issue that we are collectively working on. And as Tony says, rightly, it's a very challenging issue, but it's one that has come to us. It's come to us from a number of sources, including, of course, the work of CIRAS. So it's just another mechanism, and therefore we really welcome it.
Mm. And then, are you also seeing differences between the different operators that are being reflected within the CIRAS reports? Because, for instance, I think your operational safety data, we have, for instance, Abellio, who are here, they operate 8% of TfL's buses, but account for just 3% of TfL's collisions. So there will be other operators who are accounting for a higher proportion of collisions. Are you seeing a difference in the CIRAS reporting from these different companies?
I don't think probably an issue that Chris can comment on. I mean, the individual incidents of CIRAS reporting that from an employee of an operator are then dealt with on a case-by-case basis with that operator, as they should be, by CIRAS. So I can't really comment on that. What I would say on the prevalence of incidents, of course, is that it's not only that about the operators, but where the routes go in London, and we do have a higher incidence of incidents in the centre of London than we do elsewhere. So there are different factors at play about where incidents occur on the network and so on. Well, I don't know if Chris perhaps is more able to comment on different operators than I am.
I mean, I think there is a wide variety of responses, going from very proactive to this is a report that we really need to listen to. Let's have a look and see if that tallies with any other information we're getting from other sources. From that end of the scale right to this is a total nuisance, I'm not interested in responding to this, and it's quite a difficult issue for us. So it very much varies. It varies dependent upon the operator. It varies dependent upon exactly who's responding to the report. so that there's a difference in safety cultures, and that sometimes manifests itself in the kind of response and the quality of response that comes back. But there are pockets of really excellent stuff, and then there are some responses which you look at and think that's not too good, and may represent something else in terms of safety culture going on underneath. We would obviously like to see high quality responses where the particular issue has been acted on, and that initial safety concern raised has been closed down.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the TfL could take some of these strategic issues and pick them up from the work that's coming through the CIRAS reporting?
I mean, it's certainly good to sort of bring those common themes up and see if those tally with other sources of information, and perhaps we've got a small part to play there. I think it's the point's been made a few times that we're talking about quite a small sample of reports, but if it does represent a wider trend, and if we can tie that up, join that up with other sources of data, it may be representative, and it may tell us something that is perhaps not available through those sources as well. So in terms of content, in terms of the issues, it may point to similar issues that come out in accident and incidents, which is good to sort of join up with. And then what we may have there is some underlying data on the safety culture, which may be difficult to get through traditional means. And if we can flag that up, that's going to be useful to TfL too. So yeah, some joined up thinking there, I think, is the answer.
Yep, thank you. I'd just like to come to Wayne now. 57% of people reporting felt the issue they were worried about could cause injury to staff or passengers, and 32% feared that a road traffic collision could result if their concern went unaddressed. So, first of all, do Unite members have any feedback on the CIRAS reporting process?
It's not been as advertised as widely, I think, as everybody would have hoped. We had an initial presentation from CIRAS just after drivers were included, and we had a follow-up before Christmas this year, and it was information that had been passed to some operators hadn't been trickled out into garages and to members and drivers. And I think it's part of a growing process. There is always a certain amount of cynicism to anything new that comes in. I do think there will be an increase in reports from drivers in the next year or so, because it's becoming more embedded. The reputation of it is growing. People do feel comfortable to do it. It does highlight not only if there's issues between the driver and the operator, but also if maybe some of our structures and processes aren't working as well as they should work or could work. So it is a learning process for everybody at the moment. It is working, but I think it can work.
Sorry, Wayne, could you stop? Could the gentleman please leave the chamber to take his phone call and then turn his phone off, please? I'm really sorry. It's absolutely distracting the meeting.
Best.
What a number of staff have been over to help. Could you please turn your phone off, sir, please? Just actually have the phone ringing. If you turn your phone off, please. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just it's a small thing. The acoustics in here just really is distracting. Is it off now? Is it off? Yes? Thank you very much. Sorry, back to you, Wayne.
Okay. It is a growing confidence in the process, and I think that it will grow in benefit. There does need to be a better involvement at a local level. I don't doubt at all that TfL and the operators are fully engaged in what it is and what it means to be. But I think there's cultural changes in garages that need to happen about reporting and reporting back, and making sure that everybody's aware and what the issues are. Because otherwise, we won't get the full worth out of it if we're not engaging at every single level in an organisation.
Is there anything in particular that you think could be happening at the bus garages to actually get that cultural change to happen?
Engaging more with local representatives. I think that when you hit the day-to-day management level and the engagement with health and safety committees, Tony rightly said there's an health and safety committee at every garage. And we've made it clear that we believe that CIRAS should be on the agenda for every single health and safety committee. But I think there is a reluctance to do it because there's a concern about highlighting problems that may or may not be there. It's about bringing it more at a local level than it is about at a higher level.
Okay, so is that something, Gareth, are you able to take that away in terms of the need to get Cyrus more embedded?
I mean, absolutely, we will. You know, we believe it's a very important tool. I know the operators are committed to it as well. As Wayne said, if there are any issues at a local level, we'll be encouraging operators to address those. And obviously, you know, United got a part to play there also to help to flag up any issues with its adoption. But we just think it's a great tool and it should be encouraged, and we can make sure that's picked up in our regular dialogue.
That's great, because I think, you know, we've heard from Sarah the absolute devastation to families when these collisions and crashes happen. It's not just oops, it's not an accident. It is, you know, these are really serious, life-changing things, and it's also for anyone who is involved at the wheel of a vehicle when there is a life-changing incident. That is also a life-changing experience for them. Just a couple more questions quickly for Wayne. All these reports about fatigue, and in particular this sort of 7% about pressurised driving. What is Unite doing to ensure that these issues are properly addressed?
We had carried out a London-wide safety survey amongst our members to get the reality of what this is, several thousand responses. And we'll be taking this up at a local level with the forum we have with TfL and the operators, because we can't ignore what the reality of this is that there is a high amount of fatigue for drivers. And whether it's long hours, enforced overtime, traffic, general pressure and stress, abusive passengers, everything leads to one result, which is drivers potentially not performing to their best, and then that creates a likelihood of injuries. So we are concerned about, we are trying to work as constructively as we can with the operators and TfL about fatigue, but there is some real core problems with it. It's around scheduling, traffic, congestion, something out of everybody's control to a certain extent. The pollution is a problem because tiredness affected by pollution. There is a much wider issue around fatigue and how we deal with it, as well as lifestyle and diet and everything else. It's a much deeper thing that we all need to look at and make sure we work collectively to get it resolved.
And coming back to the issue of congestion, you know, the cost of this congestion, if this is resulting in driver fatigue and resulting in pressurised driving, then the cost of that congestion is actually death and life-changing injuries for Londoners, which puts more pressure on the congestion report that the committee has recently published. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you. What I'd like to, we're going to bring you in the next section, Sarah, so if you could bring your comments there. I'm conscious, members, we've got 4 more sections to get through, so maybe we're just a little bit more pace. Let's look at passenger support. Joanne.
My question's to Sarah, to start with. You've spoken eloquently this morning about your life-changing experience, and you talked about the court case you had to go through. It was obviously extremely gruelling, and what was apparent is actually your needs were very different as someone who had been very badly affected by this incident. What did you discover that you actually needed in terms of support from Transport for London? And I know you've been quite instrumental in changing their support that they do give, and in particular the setting up of the support, the Sarah Hope support line.
Well, as I said, our incident happened in 2007. There was no support whatsoever, absolutely nothing. In fact, I didn't even think of Transport for London for 7 years. I thought about Metroline. Basically, what happens is you have this terrible incident, and maybe this is just a time I can just start talking about. So there was no support at all. I had a lawyer who literally offered money. This is what happens. Sorry, I'm just going to try and get it all in the right sort of order. Basically, what's happened since 2007, April 2007, 148 human lives have been killed by London buses. You know, that's 15 a year and practically 1 a month. And, you know, this has to stop. And then after 7 years, with the intervention of Boris Johnson, Metroline and Transport for London apologised. Up until then, I hadn't even thought about Transport for London, but I was told, but of course they are the umbrella organisation that run all the bus operators. So I'd been wanting Metroline to apologise, and they didn't. and Metroline just ignored me whenever I tried to contact them, and I could tell you a little bit more about that if you want me to. But 7 years after my family's horror, Boris made Metroline apologise, and that's when I said sorry and things, you know, you said sorry, so I want things to change. So the Sarah Hope line was established, and I told Transport for London there needed to be a voice of kindness at the end of the telephone for people who are really, really struggling, people who've lost family members, or for people who've suffered life-changing injuries, you know, and their carers. I mean, you know, if a family member suffers a life-changing injury, it's not just that person whose lives has been damaged, it is the entire family. You know, you have to think about the whole family. So Transport for London are really trying hard. You know, they have, it's in Pier Walk, and I visit it regularly, and I've seen for myself the hard work and dedication of the staff there. The staff have been trained by the Samaritans, by Crews, by lots of different charities out there to be able to speak to people in the correct way. I don't think enough people out there don't know about the Sarah Hope line. You know, the Sarah Hope line surely is a good news story for Transport for London. They are finally listening to victims, and they are offering the financial support and just kindness they need in that hour of need. And that was something that we didn't have. So I'm very disappointed when I read in the Croydon Advertiser that the Sarah Hope line didn't manage to call somebody back. I want to know what that was about. I want to know why that particular case went wrong. You know, the Croydon, so when the tram accident happened, or incident happened, the numbers of people calling the Sarah Hope line went up from about 14 people to about 261. I don't know how many people exactly, but, you know, the Sarah Hope line exists, but there's a lot more that Transport for London need to do. You know, people need to know more about it. I need to know, Transport for London, what are they doing about apologising to victims? Because I want everyone to be apologised to. You know, when I started talking to Transport for London, I learned some shocking things from Transport for London managers. I learned that we don't have names. You know, victims on the network, we don't really have names. We're just insurance statistics. And as you go to a personal injury claim, you know, that's what you are. You are another insurance statistic. You're not really a person. So there is progress with the Sarah Hope line. Sarah Hope line can't get involved legally at all with anything. They are literally a voice of kindness at the end of the line, which is vital at the time when tragedy strikes. But I am very disappointed to learn that Transport for London don't keep up with the people that they're, you know, TfL don't even know how the hundreds of people its bus crashes are sending to hospital with serious injuries are doing. Transport for London don't keep in touch. They're not interested, really, in the people that are hurt. And I think you need to show interest and kindness, and this needs, you know, and then I was a bit disappointed to find out that Metroline, the company that hurt us, you know, in 2015, they were the company with the highest number of pedestrian fatalities, but they were still named by Transport for London to be the best operator of the year. You know, I don't quite know why that happened. Why were they the best operator of the year if they had the highest number of fatalities? You know, we've heard today that Abello didn't have as many. You know, how many did you have?
Fatalities, I can't tell you. I can think of the most recent one, but I can't tell you in total.
But, you know, I don't know if this is now the right time for me to talk about victim support.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Okay, actually. Right.
Can you let us know what you think, what extra you think TfL should do?
Right, okay. I've been talking to Transport for London about this a lot. And of course, I think we have to be very grateful for the Sarah Hope line. I think it's a good start, but I do very much think it's a start because if you're going to help people at their hour of need, it's like sending somebody to hospital, and when they're starting to get better, it's like, get out and go and look after yourself now. You need to keep up with those people, find out how they are. So we need to oblige TfL to do more to make victims and their families aware that the Sarah Hope Line exists, because there's a TfL report that came out in January 2017 to say that only 14 calls from bus victims had been received by the Sarah Hope Line, so they didn't even know about it. So there's a voice of kindness that's there waiting for them. Transport for London are paying for it, but the people didn't even know about it. So it's very important we think of some way of the victims getting to know the Sarah Hope Line. It's a fine line, isn't it? Because the Sarah Hope Line exists to help people with life-changing injuries, people who witness dreadful things on the network, or families of the bereaved. So what we don't want is people with very minor injuries getting in touch with the Sarah Hope Line all the time. But that's something for the Sarah Hope Line people to judge if they are, relevant to the line. But I think it's very important that Transport for London, this is a good news story for them. They are finally listening and finally being kind, whereas obviously in 2007 there was no voice of kindness whatsoever. So we need to think about how more people can know about the Sarah Hope Line. I think the Sarah Hope Line needs to take a more proactive stance on finding out how the victims and their families are doing. And this is something I've been talking to a few people at City Hall about, is that TfL need to work with MOPAC, the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. They've been talking about setting up a Victims Commissioner for London. Now, this, in my experience, is because personal injury law is a shambles. It is a horrible, horrible experience. We hear about ambulance chasing lawyers, and I know all about them. I believe it's an abomination of human dignity. It is just a way for personal injury lawyers to make money out of people's disasters. And you can imagine, when that bus hit my family, there were 3 members of my family. Now, for personal injury lawyers, that's their bread and butter. Well, it's not just bread and butter, is it? It's bloody gold dust to them, okay? So, and if you look at an advert for a personal injury lawyer, you will read about how much money they've made for, I've won millions of pounds for somebody. But they won't be telling you how much money they've creamed off that millions of pounds, right? Okay, so I believe personal injury law is a way just for personal injury lawyers to make money out of our disasters. But I have started speaking to Transport for London about it, and I believe they're starting to listen. Because I can report that Vernon Everett from Transport for London has committed to asking the Mayor to write a letter to the Ministry of Justice so the government can establish precisely what they're doing to protect victims of civil claims. I'm looking forward to seeing this letter, and I have to say I'm also part of the Victims Commissioner's Victim Reference Group. The Victims Commissioner, Baroness Newlove, her remit does not include providing support for victims who go through the regulatory and civil process. So she looks after victims of crime. If you're not a victim of crime, the government will not look after you. So Transport for London need to work with the government. Just for an example of when things go wrong, the psychologist who was appointed to look after my family has been under investigation with the Health and Care Professions Council for 18 allegations of fraud and misconduct against my family.
I think that's not really appropriate for here, to be honest.
Oh, isn't it?
No, I don't feel. I think we're just focusing on...
I was wondering, can I just put some of those points you've made to Gareth? And perhaps I should own up to previously being a personal injury lawyer, but hopefully acting for people who... And trying to get the...
I don't want to get into that Gareth.
Right.
Gareth, perhaps I can ask you, I've got a range of issues. But first, I think Sarah's quite right, and we find this in the police as well, actually, that when things go wrong, public bodies in particular are very reluctant to say sorry, because they often confuse that with accepting liability in a legal process. But actually that can make such a big difference at the outset. Is that something that TfL is looking at?
Yeah, so, I mean, first thing I want to say is a huge thank you to Sarah, actually, for the work that she's been doing. So she has turned, I think, what is an absolutely tragic and unimaginable incident for many of us that haven't been involved in such a thing, into something that's very positive. And it's very positive for our organisation, because actually we have had, in a way, some of the the scales removed from our eyes in this area. You know, we really weren't you know, active at all in the sorts of issues that Sarah's been outlining, and actually we have made a start, and it is only a start. The Sarah Hope Line is a fantastic resource, and it's something that we want everybody to know about. It is difficult. We don't automatically know the names of those that are affected in injuries on the road network. That information isn't ours, and we ask the police to share such information with us. We ask individuals to have awareness. We're giving cards now to our first line responders. We're talking to the operators about how we make that well known for bus drivers, for those that are in the vicinity of an incident, to make people aware, as well as the general awareness across London through the publicity that we can give. But it's only a start, and we really do want everybody to know about the resources that the Sarah Hope Line can give, because actually, you know, it's something that we ought to be doing, and we now are able to do. The same about the saying sorry. You know, we as an organisation, we do care very deeply about the services we provide, and we have a lot of impact on people's lives across London, and we are absolutely wanting to say sorry where we can. You know, it's really just a human thing that we should always do. And I would say, you know, the tragic events in the tram incident, without the Sarah Hope Line, would not have been able to provide some of the very extensive support that we did in that process. So actually, you know, a huge tribute to Sarah and the work she's doing. She's really helping us as an organisation really start to move forward in this area. And I think this has been a big step forward, and I think there's lots more that we can do, and we're having that very regular dialogue, and Vernon Everett, my colleague, is the lead for us with Sarah to be able to do that, and it's been very, very productive, very progressive, and just really helpful.
And the line itself can offer support. It can signpost people to other areas that can offer support. Does it offer upfront payments? Because obviously a legal process can take quite a while, and actually just immediate payments for often quite small costs can actually make a massive difference to people.
Absolutely it can, and in helping people with travel expenses, providing them with immediate support and so on, we absolutely do that, and the line has been doing that actually for those that contact it from, you know, a variety of sources. So yes, we can do that, and we do that without recourse to liability or any of those things. These are things that are immediate hardship that we need to step forward and help address, and the line is there for that too.
Okay, and Sarah also raised you'll need to work with MOPAC and the police. I understand that not only do British Transport Police, but Metropolitan Police officers are meant to be giving out the Sarah Hope Line number to victims of incidents. Do you monitor how well they do that?
It's a really good question. You know, funnily enough, we asked that same question ourselves because it's a challenge, because obviously these are professionals doing their job in really trying and difficult circumstances. We have asked to have feedback on how well this is done, and obviously the test of it in the end is how well known the line is and how many people take advantage of its services. But you know, we really do want to monitor how many people understand that the line is there available, and we have a range of mechanisms for doing that, from feedback we get from the police and the London Ambulance Service and so on, through to surveys and so on that we can conduct, and of course the use of the line itself. But actually any information we can get on its usage is going to help us make it more widely available to people.
Okay, and could you just let me know what the budget is for the Sarah Hope Line, and if you've got plans to expand that budget?
I don't know specifically. I don't think we have such a thing as a constrained financial budget. That's not what this is about. This is about providing the level of support that's necessary. And as I say, it has been a really, really useful resource, you know, in response to the tragic incident on the tram derailment. And actually, in that process, we have provided it with extra resources when we felt that it needed it. So it's not a question of budgeting this. It's a question of making sure that the line is there, it's working effectively, and that people know to use it.
And you're confident if there's another major incident, you'd be able to provide resources quite flexibly and quickly?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always trying to learn from these situations. You know, we're trying to make best use of it, and feedback is always welcome. You know.
I think the final point that Sarah made is actually you have now got quite a cohort of people who you know have been injured as a result of on the network, and whether you have any plans to actually keep in touch with those people, perhaps use them as part of your focus group for improvements further. Is that something you have plans with?
So it's certainly something we're going to look into. I mean, the Sarah Hope Line's relatively new. This approach for TfL is relatively new. And we want to look into how we can provide ongoing support. You know, we've certainly said that we are here and, you know, for as long as is necessary for people, and we try very hard to fulfil that obligation when people contact us and are engaged with the line itself. So absolutely, it's a start, and there's lots more we want to do.
Thank you. I think we will want to get details of at least what your core staffing is and to understand how the line works. Sean wanted to come in quickly.
Just to make this very short, the point has been made about working with the MPS and the work they've done around victim support, because they have improved. They started at a very low place and improved. But surely as two mayoral controlled bodies, you could be writing to the mayor to ask him to prompt them to help you some more. So you made a comment about you don't always get the information about from an incident from the police. Surely a protocol can be fixed there, because we are talking about very traumatic events to Londoners, and particularly the Londoners who are involved. So I can't understand why that hasn't been addressed in a strong procedural fashion.
And I think, you know, I mean, I'm no expert, so I'm not going to comment on the particulars of it, other than to say that obviously the names and addresses and contact details of individuals are a matter for individuals, and these are private individuals out on the road network. Clearly, if there is data that we can get and information that we can proactively contact people, of course, you know, we can try and do that. But that is something that is for the police. And they're not, in many cases, our customers. They don't have a relationship with TfL. The key thing from my perspective, just to think as Sarah said, is if people know that this support is available, if it's generally known, then that's the best thing we can do to be able to make sure that it's used and that we can provide support like this. It is a very difficult area around making sure that data is shared, because, of course, it's individuals' data.
May well pick that up as a recommendation. Thank you. Right, Tom, incentives for bus operators, something that comes up an awful lot.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll start with Gareth. How does TfL incentivise bus operators to prioritise safety?
So we have a range of mechanisms that we have contractually and otherwise with the bus operators for their overall performance, and safety is very much a part of that performance. We do an absolute minimum standard. We audit bus operators every year, and there's a minimum standard that a bus company needs to attain in its processes and its attitude towards safety before they can and continue to operate within London. So there's a minimum level.
So if they don't meet that, they can't carry on?
So absolutely, there's a minimum standard. And then above that, with a variety of mechanisms. At the moment, we are putting together, going back to the data point earlier, we're putting together these data sources in order to be able to develop a performance scorecard in this area. It's a brand new initiative, and we are talking at the moment to operators and to us about how we might use that information to further uprate the incentivisation for operators. The culture we want here is one of complete learning and openness. That's the culture we want to engage in. And we use whatever mechanisms we can with the operators. But really, this is something that the operators themselves own, and they have their own ideas and their own initiatives. But on the very specific of incentivisation, we are looking at this the scorecard that we're developing, the set of measures that we're developing, and seeing how we can put that into the overall monitoring and management regime we have with the operators.
And why don't you have a direct link between operators' safety records and financial rewards or penalties?
It's not something that we've had explicitly in the past, you know, in terms of the specific use of individual data and so on. But it is something we are looking towards doing. Clearly, the precursors to those that we talked about before, such as the monitoring, driver quality monitoring, the customer surveys and so on that were mentioned earlier, those are things that we take into account when looking at the overall operator performance and whether we award them new contracts and so on. So that is used in that process as a measure of whether the operator's training and so on is effective. And we, as I said...
So as a scoring mechanism?
Yeah, so those surveys produce a score. Those scores are discussed with the operators, and there's, of course, used for benchmarking purposes across all the operators across the network, with the aim of driving up the level of scores and making sure that the overall quality improves. But the specific of using a suite of measures to performance manage operators is something we're looking at very actively at the moment. We haven't reached any conclusions on exactly how to do that, but we are looking at it right now.
Because it's something I think Network Rail does in some areas. They link, I think it's for staff, they have a financial bonus which takes into account safety records and things like that.
And some operators have that approach too, which Tony might want to comment on. You're talking about our relationship,
yes,
and we're looking at that.
Yeah. Can I bring in Tony here actually to talk about
Yeah, I
this
think
issue?
one of the things that's prevalent in the whole of the bus business is that it's almost like you shouldn't need any incentives because it's just an absolute no-brainer to try and reduce your third-party claim costs. Actually, it's such a huge amount of money; it should be something that you'd go at relentlessly in any respect. But we very much welcome TfL's thoughts on the safety scorecard. I think it helps. I mean, benchmarking is always useful. You can have a league table for everything, but the use for the benchmarking is to say, well, hang on a sec, well, why are they better than us? You know, and even if you're the best in the market, you can't be complacent. You should be looking to continuously improve, and people move around in league tables. So it's a way of measuring yourself against other people. Why is it they're better than us? What could we do differently? How could we improve? So it should be almost a natural thing. You know, we're a commercial business. We should be interested in the vast cost of those third-party claims. So we shouldn't need that massive incentive. It should be so glaringly obvious that you try and reduce it to the absolute minimum. I think there is a point when you get to the absolute minimum, where do you go next, or do you ever get there? But that's the semantics in many respects.
Tom comes in. Could I just welcome, we've got two primary schools before us today. We've got Molam Primary School from Tower Hamlets and Marion Richardson Primary School from Tower Hamlets. You're very welcome. This is the Transport Committee, and we've got guests before us, and we're looking at how we can make our buses even safer on the roads in London. Back to you, Tom.
And is there any conflict? I mean, how do you balance up sort of waiting time targets and safety targets? Is there a sort of conflict there?
I mean, in terms of the way I'm incentivised and my top team and also the senior sort of middle managers, we do have some specific safety targets in there. Now, you can always argue that one incident is too many, but to set this benchmarking, we do have safety targets within our own bonus scorecard. So it's very much a direct relationship. We report it up to our board on a monthly basis, and you know, the whole organisation has a safety emphasis that is very visible to all. So it's very overt, it's out there, and the aim is to get better.
And are you looking at other organisations for sort of inspiration as to what could be brought in terms of safety measures?
Very much so. And I think that's something again that's evolving. How do, in our instance, we can go look at the rail industry in our business. In Abellio, we have far more rail operation than actually we do bus. So what is it that they do that we could do better? How do they get messaging across? We talk about driver behaviour and those messages. What tools do they use to get those messages out? So it is a very much sort of outward-looking process as much as it is inward, and we welcome TfL's wider view, because we don't directly go and talk to our competitors. That's not the nature of the market. But actually having a forum where we can discuss those things, as we said earlier, there's this safety forum, is very helpful for us.
Unless anyone's burning to come in, I'll leave it there because I'm aware of the time.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Tom.
Sorry, Wayne.
It's just, I mean, I think that the very title of it, incentive for safety, is probably sums it up better than anything else. You shouldn't have to incentivise safety. As Tony said, it should be the bottom line, and it shouldn't be about trying to reduce third-party claim costs either. It should just be that is what the bottom line is. There should be no incentive. What there probably should be is the opposite. There should be penalties for it, because I'm not aware of anything in the tendering process that says if you are a continually unsafe operator that you can lose the route or you can lose the contract. If you really want to make this something that people are going to take seriously, then that needs to be a part of it. If you set these benchmarks, you set these standards, not minimum standards, but you set good high standards, and if you don't reach them or you continually in breach of them, then there should be the risk that you will lose that contract because you're not safe.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's move on to bus technology. James started mentioning this right at the start. Sean, you're going to lead this first.
My first comments may need to Gareth and Tom to start, then everybody can come in. How does TfL use its influence to improve safety through better bus design and new technology?
So that one, if I may. Excuse me. The bus safety standard is designed to have a kind of a holistic approach to the whole of the bus, both in terms of technology and vehicle design. We know from road safety research that TfL have done recently around vehicle technology that has probably been the single biggest cause of our reductions in KSIs in London. So it makes sense that we then take what has been developed, particularly obviously in the car industry and also latterly in the HGV industry, and apply that to buses. We've done a couple of trials already. One was around cyclist pedestrian detection, another was around bus ISA, so speed limiters for the buses. But the bus safety standard is designed to do that a bit more holistically and also have an evidence-based approach. So I mentioned earlier that we've been doing some work looking at the police collision investigation files so that we can really understand, instead of thinking that a technology sounds like a good idea, actually would it have prevented a fatal or serious injury? The point we're at now is that we've got a long list of potential countermeasures that we want to trial. And these vary from things that will reduce killed and seriously injured outside of the bus to things that we can do inside the bus, to the bus interior, to prevent or mitigate injuries to bus passengers. We're going to be letting that as a whole contract to an independent test house so that they can take those different technologies, they can test them, how they interact with each other. We then want to come up with a shorter list that will then be included in our vehicle specification, and that will be rolled out then subsequently on all new buses. But just to say, during that process, there will obviously be some kind of quick wins that come out of that. So things that maybe not technological, but a little bit simpler maybe in terms of internal bus design that we can do quicker, in which case, of course, we'll introduce those quicker. And in some aspects as well, we maybe have different issues with different types of vehicles, in which case there may be some evidence that we should do some retrofitting. But the overall proposal is that they will come onto new vehicles.
Can you give us an idea of any new technologies that you've already implemented or are very, are in the pipe or on the way down? Because if you drive a car, we regularly see that there's new active systems coming all the time, pedestrian detection, self-braking, all that kind of stuff. Are we beginning to see that in buses? Do you have that planned? Have you done anything recently that I should be happy about? Because I use the bus a lot.
So pedestrian autonomous emergency braking is very much in development at the moment, and that will be part of the first tranche of the bus safety standard. So although we will introduce the standard at one given point in time, the part of the work will also be to develop a roadmap whereby we know some of this technology exists, but it might not be quite ready for a bus yet. But certainly from the research, the autonomous emergency braking came out top. Now, of course, we've got some challenges with that, because if a bus is stopping automatically, then when we have standing passengers, whether that harsh braking would result in injury inside the bus. So there'll be a lot of testing done around what the thresholds are for that stopping, and also whether the bus comes to a complete stop or whether it just reduces its speed right down before a collision occurs. The other things that will be first on the list to look at are front of bus design. So there's been a lot of research done to the shape of the front of the bus could influence how an impact with pedestrians occurs, and to try and reduce that impact, or certainly try and reduce the instance of maybe them going under the bus if they are struck by the bus. And then also really simple things like the mirrors. I mean, that's certainly something that we'll be looking at to make sure that both the mirrors reduce the blind spot straight through to the arms that the mirror is attached to that need to be able to flip back if there's been a collision. And that's something that obviously we will be doing very quickly this year.
Just two last questions in the interest of brevity. Can you give us an update on the iBus, and can you tell us if there's any potential risk to the quiet nature of electric and hydrogen buses?
Yes, so do you mean in terms of the next stage of iBus? So
yes,
iBus,
where is it at?
So iBus 2 is due for rollout in 2021. But in the meantime, certainly in terms of in that sense, we'll be looking to introduce a lot of the technology side through iBus rather than having bolt-on solutions. Yeah, okay. A good example of that is ISA. So from that point, ISA will be inbuilt into iBus, but obviously we want to introduce that sooner than 2021, so it will be a bolt-on solution for that interim period. In terms of the quiet buses, there's going to be EU legislation around acoustic vehicle alerting systems. This also forms part of the bus safety standard because, of course, for hybrid and electric vehicles, we want to ensure that, A, that there is a sound so that it's not causing a danger to partially sighted users and pedestrians, but also that that sound is consistent across the fleet, because I think it could get very confusing if every different bus was fitted with a different sound. So that's certainly something that we're working on.
I make a plea as someone who lives near a bus stop that the diesel engine was horrifically loud and ruined my life for many years. So you need to think very carefully about what that sound is, how it sounds and how far it travels. But Chair, I'll stop there. Thank you.
That's good. I think maybe in our follow-up correspondence, getting a time scale, I think there were some great initiatives there, but just to get a feel for when you're hoping to roll stuff out and so on would be helpful, because that's obviously important, and the stuff on lorries, you say, there's an awful lot you can learn from that. Let's go to our final area of questions. Florence, you're going to lead this on road design.
I'm sure we've all seen the stats in terms of some of the collisions and a number of quite dangerous hotspots where there have been, unfortunately, fatalities with bus passengers. Just earlier this year, there was an accident, a major accident, just outside the town hall in Brixton, my constituency. My understanding was that, quite serious, and the lady, I think, maybe lost her leg. So in terms of looking at the road design and layout, what more can TfL be doing to look at improving that, Gareth?
So it's a very important area. When you look at all of the reducing the likelihood of an incident occurring, the road layout and the road design and how people interact with it is very important. We are working, there's work ongoing at the moment to continue to update where bus casualty hotspots might be occurring. And then we look at where those are and then look at what the highway design characteristics and the users of the highway in that area are likely to be. We've done quite a lot of work over recent years, particularly with the introduction of the cycle superhighways, to look at different types of interventions for making the overall road environment safer. Speed is an important part of that, so actually slower speeds are a very important contributor to making the road environment safer, as is in some cases the width or indeed the nature of the pedestrian crossings, the way that bus stops are sited, and the prevalence of pedestrians to go from one side of the road to another, to go to a different bus stop, to go in a different direction, and so on. And as Tony said before, the siting of bus stops versus the route that the bus is taking after the bus stop and so on. These are all factors at the moment that are under active consideration. We do regularly update our highway design guidance, which is the kind of book by which we try to improve the standards of highway design, not only for our own design on our road network, but of course for the London boroughs and the work that is done on their network. So there's quite a lot here that is very active, and trying to get an improvement in the overall safe environment for buses and for all road users is a constant area of focus for our road safety team and highways design.
So the 200 million that's earmarked for bus priority measures, will any of that be used specifically for any of those collision hotspots?
So the focus of the bus priority measures are to put bus priority schemes in, but those bus priority schemes, when we put them in, need to be done in a way that is safe. And of course there are advantages and disadvantages to bus priority in relation to, particularly to pedestrian conflicts. So an advantage of bus priority is any segregation of different types of traffic. We've got evidence to show that improves the overall safety of the network. On the other hand, generally bus priority measures are operating in close proximity to pavements and elsewhere, and we do have a steady flow of buses in those areas, which is good for safety, but of course sometimes pedestrians might be tempted to try to cross a bus lane only to find traffic coming next to it and then be in a very vulnerable position indeed. So there's quite a lot here to get right. There are specific road safety budgets, obviously, that are contained within the overall Healthy Streets portfolio to be prioritised, but the bus priority has to be done in such a way as to improve safety as well as the performance of the bus network, and that's the focus of those individual scheme designs.
Wayne, Tony, is there anything that you feel that your drivers could, maybe additional training in terms of, again, that a number of different areas across London, there are always big schemes, changes to the road layouts. Do you feel that they have sufficient information on maybe when there's changes to some of their routes?
I think there's too much of it that's reactive. These things don't pop up. There is a knowledge that they're coming or they're planned to come in, and I think there's not enough proactive behaviours to make sure that people are aware, drivers are aware. I'm not convinced that the risk assessments per route are done on a regular enough basis. I think they're kind of done once, every now and again maybe, but it should be a rolling period. There should be a cycle of risk assessments for every single route in London, because there will be bits of it that change.
Yeah.
You know, more of it, you know, buses will go closer to schools or go further from schools, but there's not enough risk assessment done to make sure we do things in place that might stop them first. And we have a bit of a behaviour of not including the experts, and the experts are the drivers. You know, we all look into this. This is their daily existence of driving these roads, and I don't think we have enough involvement of the real experts about what needs to happen and the best ways to risk assess or run a route. And if we can do that, then I think we've got a better chance of getting better changes quicker.
So are we saying, just for clarity, Chair, are we saying that, say, for example, there's been a big improvement to a junction or road layout? When are the drivers actually involved? Is it a case of, okay, yes, we've got this fantastic new layout, lots of money being spent by TfL, by the local councils, or the first time the drivers know about it is when they then come back onto their buses?
Do you want to pick up the briefing? Yeah, I mean, not in reality, of course, because you know, there's a long process. None of these things.
Because I'm probably thinking there may be diversions, or they'll be taking other routes whilst that work is going on.
Which there are maps and guidance given every time there's a diversion. I mentioned earlier these route booklets that we've produced, and in those you'll find a certain number of drivers will be attributed with having contributed to those routes. So the drivers at that point have been engaged in it. I think the crucial point that Wayne makes very well is, if there is a change, that is reflected in the book, and we do consult with the drivers, or the drivers, what I'd really like to see is the drivers come and tell us of the changes. You know, I mean, some of them aren't major schemes that have changed, some of them are day-to-day type things that happen, that they you know, I'd love to think that they feel comfortable in coming and telling us that these are happening, and that does happen, to be honest. But it is trying to keep the information up to date and getting the communication out there effectively.
One of the other things I wanted to raise in terms of road design and road layout is obviously floating bus stops, which again I feel that, you know, Gareth, you've probably received correspondence from me on one of the more controversial ones that's been proposed outside St Thomas's Hospital, where it got to a stage where unfortunately the trust felt that they had to go down the judicial review route with TfL, because they felt that some of the concerns that they were getting back from patients wasn't being addressed. Do we feel that floating bus stops are safe?
So we are. So there are many advantages of floating bus stops because they do actually reduce some of the conflicts that buses have when they have to pull in and out of traffic, and also not cutting across a flow of cyclists, of course, which in the past, without a segregated and provision for bus stops, you know, would have had to have happened. But however, we are reviewing and monitoring exactly what is happening at the floating bus stops that we have at the moment. There are a new intervention associated with the cycle superhighways, and they are being reviewed in order to be able to ascertain precisely what's happening. We don't have any evidence so far that they're not safe, but obviously we're taking a very keen interest in them to make sure that all the things about them are working to the best advantage. And in most cases, in almost all cases, I think, the positioning of them is so sufficient that we can get all of the bus infrastructure into there, and that's quite important, so a proper shelter, bus stop, etc. So there's a good place for pedestrians to be. But absolutely, it's a new thing that's been associated with the cycle superhighways that has been raised with us, and we are monitoring it very closely.
Does anyone else want to comment on floating bus stops? Have you had experience of using floating bus stops, Sarah?
No. I'm sorry, I don't quite... Is a floating bus stop when it...
So, best to describe it. So there's the cycle, segregated cycle lane, and then on the other side there's the bus stop. So essentially pedestrians will have to cross over that cycle lane to get to the bus stop. And there's been some concerns around the fact that near collisions. So it's a case of, you know, more people using that shared space.
Yeah, I haven't used them. I don't think I have.
Okay. From the bus operator's perspective, again, you seen it?
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody comment on it. I'm glad someone gave an explanation as to what it was. No, you gave the explanation of what it was, because I was thinking, what's a floating bus stop?
We're all a bit techie here, I realise increasingly we become transport
I think they're a Dutch invention, I think. Yeah, which I should have known, because I work for a Dutch company, but there you go. No, I haven't heard any comment on that, to be honest. I have had an experience of my own, actually getting off in Blackfriars Road, and getting off in the middle of the road thinking it's a dual carriageway and nearly stepping out in front of another bus, actually, not one of mine, thankfully. But, yeah, so I can quite understand the issue. Yeah.
Maybe on that we should write to, because obviously Stratford has one in place, whichever bus companies operate on that stretch, to find out if they've had any.
There are a number in operation.
Yeah.
We can give you the details.
And could we get some information, because my understanding again is that a number of them are having trials with zebra crossings in them, which again would probably make them safer, so it would be good to get some information on how that's working.
I'd ask you to contact the bus, just give us some evidence on that.
Yeah, we can do that and write back to you.
Yeah, just the final one was around again the big changes at Tottenham Court Road. That was announced last year, 2017 now, and by Camden Council and TfL in terms of how we feel that shared space with buses and pedestrians will work. Do we feel that there's any, if it will help improve bus safety?
So, yeah, shared space, shared road space between all different types of vehicles and users is clearly a big issue. There are a number of schemes that are looking at, and Tottenham Court Road, as you mentioned, a shared space between pedestrians and buses. Actually, we think that the key in these areas is going to be about clear demarcation and clear understanding of how these things work. In general, buses will be travelling very slowly in these zones, and actually a bus travelling very slowly and stopping and starting at frequent bus stops actually is a better interaction than perhaps an HGV or a car or something going through a similar sort of area. So we're not against them in any sense. We think that they could have a part to play, but clearly they have to be done very carefully, and we have to evaluate what they do, and that's part of our role.
No, wasn't anything further from me.
Thank you very much. That brings to the end of our questions this morning. Thank you all so much for your contributions. Thank you, Sarah, Wayne, Jane, Gareth, Chris and Tony. If there are any things that you wish we'd asked and we haven't, I know Cyrus have already given us some detailed evidence. If there's other things you think of, please do put them in writing to us as part of our investigation. Can we just note the report and the questions we've put to the guests today in the discussion, members? Yeah. We've just got a couple of formal bits of business. Feel free to leave. We'll just finalise our few bits of business. Traffic congestion. Can we note our report, London Stalling, Reducing Traffic Congestion in London, as agreed by myself under delegated authority in consultation with party group leads? Yep, lovely. Thank you very much, members. Very good piece of work, and also really good response from the Mayor's office, so I think it'll be interesting to see what we get in the transport strategy. Our committee work programme, item 8, can we agree our work programme, including the schedule of topics for forthcoming meetings, and agree to hold an additional meeting on Wednesday the 19th of April at 2 p.m, which will be to discuss, have a big discussion with the new Mayor's Cycling and Walking Commissioner. We postponed it from December because he wasn't in post. And note the record of our site visits from Dearman Technology Centre and the High Speed 1 service at St Pancras Station. Is that agreed? Right. Thank you. Our date of our next meeting is Thursday the 2nd of March at 10 in the morning in the Chamber, where we're going to have Mike Brown, Commissioner for TfL, before us taking questions on lots of topics. No other urgent business. That ends the meeting. Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Chair.
GLA Chamber Sound.